I'm curious, Matt, what you think about. I've been thinking, yeah, I've been really pissed at Obama and Clinton since then. That's how I've been reacting. And, I don't want to make a direct comparison between Trump's malfeasance. I think he's a criminal for a long time before he was in politics. But also, I think there's a certain way that conservatives were scandalized by Bill Clinton, by a lot of propaganda, but also they went on a fishing expedition and they caught a fish with him perjuring himself and things like that. And I'm curious, like, there's no sort of, I guess, awareness by I don't think like I maybe took to heart, like I saw my people in my family in North Dakota, they hated Bill Clinton. They thought he was just completely atrocious. And I see liberals reacting that way to Trump, not understanding that like, oh, they let like they're the reason in part people hate this establishment. I'm just curious, like, if you have any thoughts on Bill Clinton.
I mean, frankly, there's sort of like the arguments you can make about Bill Clinton's policies, right? Which, people like us on the left, criticize all the time. Again, like I would join in those criticisms. But I actually think like as a man, as a person, I find Bill Clinton especially disgusting. I mean, to me, like, I think it's unforgivable, especially for a Democrat. When he was campaigning for president in 1992, I forget whether it was like technically in 1991, like during the primaries, but the 92 campaign, right? When he sort of like pressed pause on his campaign to make sure he could fly down to Arkansas to oversee the execution of Ricky Ray Rector, right? A kind of mentally disabled African-American man who, at his last meal, actually, he wanted to save the dessert for later. That's how impaired he was, right? So I just find someone like Bill Clinton, exploiting that issue like that and basically saying like, you're not going to call me Michael Dukakis, right? You're not going to tar me as someone who likes black people a little too much, maybe,
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to tar me as soft on crime. And so that kind of thing I find totally despicable. And then, these recent interviews of his, I mean, there's so much I could say about Bill Clinton, Matt. Like you opened up a can of worms. Like this is where the late Christopher Hitchens was totally right. Like, he had the Clintons dead to rights. In his book on the Clintons, I think it's come out under different titles, but, like, No One Left to Lie To is the main title. Like, I do like, that holds up. Yeah, there's a lot to say about Bill Clinton. But these recent interviews of him, it was just a reminder to me of what a disgusting creature I find him. Just kind of sitting back and lecturing and talking about people like us who wear ties to work. It's like, fuck you. I can swear on here, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, no, I was about to bring that interview up because it really is so out of touch. I mean, in Texas, there has been this kind of dream that Texas is going to shift blue with demographic shifts, and that's been shown to be just completely wrong.
Right.
Actually, like dangerously wrong for at least the way that the state Democratic Party is operating here, and probably even for the National Democratic Party. But one thing that's really interesting is that like when you go and you interview people who don't vote or stop voting in this state, which Texas Monthly did, which is a great thing. It's very rare for for non-voters to get interviewed. And it was so fascinating to read. I'll link the piece in the show notes for people. But like, it was really fascinating to read all these people, particularly in the Rio Grande Valley and some of these areas that really switched from, Democrat strong hold to Republicans' most recent election. And people cited Bill Clinton and Barack Obama as people who they hoped would change the system, people who they voted for, and people who they felt personally betrayed by. And, a lot of the campaigning that we saw, was about you save democracy, all this kind of stuff. But it was also, let's return back, to the old days. And, that's just a kind of question. It's like, were the 90s good for you? Were like the 2010s good for you? And you're going to get different answers with different folks. But for a lot of working people, they understand the world around them a lot better than I think pundits recognize, particularly, including like left-wing pundits recognize, people are like, oh, they don't understand NAFTA and all this. No, people actually, when you go and talk to them, they have a much better understanding of the world around them than they get credit for.
Yes. No, I want to mention something in particular. One kind of argument I've made before is that in some ways, like this era now, the current era, call it the Trump era if you want. I do feel like, go back to 2016. It wasn't just Trump. Like Bernie Sanders almost knocked Hillary Clinton off. Like that was an incredibly close primary. So I feel like, putting aside all the debates about the 2016 primary, you look at that year, there clearly was something afoot, right? There clearly was a populist kind of, backlash to, I think, especially, Obama's handling of the financial crisis, who got bailed out and who didn't. And kind of what we're seeing now is something of a delayed. Obama was kind of like an 8-year parentheses where people gave him a shot to fix it. to bring the hope and change. And when he didn't, I think not only did, the material conditions of working class people, because of his financial policies, not only like was that a factor, but I think it really was like the almost messianic expectations. Do you remember the ad that the McCain campaign put out that summer of 2008, which was the celebrity ad? That Obama was this valorized celebrity, glitz and glamour, traveling all over the world. And it kind of picked up on something, because remember he won the Nobel Peace Prize before he even took office? There was a slightly ridiculous, maybe, people got their expectations too high. But on the other hand, I remember the DNC, the Democratic Convention that year in 2008, when, Obama became the nominee, he actually said, not the day he won the presidency, but the day he became the nominee, that this is the day when the oceans will begin to recede and the earth will heal. Simply becoming the Democratic nominee. He got up on stage and said that. And I just feel like there was the real policies, the kind of results of them that, again, we know who benefited and who wasn't bailed out, who was hurt. But there's also the expectations that he himself raised in kind of extraordinary ways at times as a candidate.
Yeah, they have those graphs that people who don't like to point to, like poverty rate or savings, they'll point to, look, Americans don't understand their economic situation because their views on sort of optimism change wildly given who's in office. But I was one of those people who would have said, okay, it's 2014. I prefer Obama to the Romney Republicans in the economy, right? But also, if you would have asked me 3 years later, I'd be like, yeah, man, they didn't do fucking enough and they completely goddamn blew it. Like, those polls don't mean anything. And except I think they do kind of tell a story that people are getting sick of the treatment of, especially the political economy.